with the Milberger team at NFM Lending here in Linwood, Washington. Probably one of the biggest questions we get all the time is value appraisals. I mean, it's just a hot topic no matter what. And now with all the different changes due to COVID, we thought that would be a prime opportunity to bring our appraisal management company, Apex, on to talk about appraisals, answer any questions you guys have, and kind of give you a quick overview of where we're at right now with timing and requirements and things like that. So I think this is going to be a great class. So I appreciate you guys all coming on. I'll introduce our guys. We've got Jay Josephs here as the Chief Review Appraiser. He's going to be doing the most of it. He's the actual appraiser that we want to hear from. And then we've got our main guy, Caleb Allen, who is our representative for Apex, who we deal with a lot and who is helping us put on this presentation today. So we really appreciate both you guys coming on. Caleb, why don't you give us a quick overview of Apex and let's get this sucker going.
Yeah, first, Jeff, just thanks for having us on board. You're an amazing partner and we really appreciate you guys. A little bit about me. I spent several years on the loan origination side as a producing branch manager, and then came over here to the appraisal management side of things about 4 or 5 years ago. Apex has been around since 2008. We're a national AMC. We have over 6,000 appraisers on our panel. Where we really shine is our customer service, our technology, and our super low revision rates. We all know that you can have a file underwritten in a quick time frame, but if it comes back with a bunch of conditions, it's not worth much. So same with appraisals. We want to get you guys a finished product when we deliver it. So the guy that'll be presenting, Jay Josephs, he's one of our Chief Review Appraisers. I've had the pleasure of being a part of many of these with him. He's an amazing speaker and really knows his stuff. So I'm excited to have him on board, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to him.
Awesome. Hey, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here, Jeff, for having us. Thanks for having us. For me, I've been appraising 30 years. I think our company, I want to say, Caleb, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think we did like 13,000 appraisals last month. It's about as crazy a time as I've ever seen in these 30 years of appraising. And I will tell you also that it is probably more difficult today for me to complete an appraisal than maybe at any other time in my career. What we're dealing with is something unprecedented. And I can tell you, so I'm sitting at a desk here in Arizona right now, and I was doing my research before this call, and I feel like Arizona and the Seattle area have something in common. We're having a higher frequency of appraisals coming in below contract prices right now. And I think that's due to the complexity of the market. And I'm glad you guys on this call are taking the time to hear things from my perspective. And at the end of this, the goal is to give you some really good information and to maybe make you a little better at your job. And what I mean by that is I'm a big believer in the best realtors wrap their arms around their clients and take them through the process from start to finish. And for the most part, the dialogue's been for a long time that you have no say in the appraisal process. And I want to pivot that. I want to change that mentality, and I want you to get involved. And I'd like you to start meeting appraisers and come armed with really good information. And so that's the goal of all this, is to help you understand what's going on right now in this COVID-related environment, and then give you some good tips for how to maybe be impactful and hopefully have fewer appraisal issues. So this slide I'm showing you, and I'm sorry to say I don't have the information for the Seattle area, although I do have some ancillary information to share with you in a bit. But when I talk about unprecedented times and I talk about the complexities that I'm faced with in trying to give you an accurate valuation, this chart is incredibly important. And so what you're looking at right now are March, April, and May sales figures first for our Arizona Regional MLS, which is basically MLS for the Phoenix metropolitan area. And you also are seeing March, April, and May, and I'll get to June in a minute, slides for average price per square foot. Just to kind of summarize what we're looking for or looking at is in March, there were almost 8,900 transactions in the Phoenix metro area. In April, that dropped to 7,180. And in May, that dropped to just over 7,000. That is a 3-month decline of 21%. That's a dramatic number. And the other thing that's important about this is I look at March as pre-COVID, because really, as you all know, March closings are typically February contracts. I just like to think of how wonderful February was. I miss February so bad before we were dealing with all this COVID stuff. So I look at March closings as, generally speaking, pre-COVID, April and May as dramatically as you could be in the middle of COVID. But what's even more startling to me as an appraiser is looking at average price per square foot. In March, of those 8,900 sales, the average sales price was $231, which I'm speculating is significantly lower than the average price in the Seattle market. In April, that number dropped to $212 a foot. And in May, that dropped down to $178 a foot. So of those 7,000 closings in May, the average sales price was under $180 a foot. That is a decline of 23% in a 90-day period, which I am going to tell you, I've never seen anything like that in my life. So I think it's a little bit nuanced in the sense that, and I don't know, Jeff, if you notice this as we did here, the luxury market got hit harder initially than the lower price stuff. And so I think that while this does show some pretty dramatic declines in sales price as COVID took hold of our market, I do think it probably isn't quite as dramatic because a lot of it is just as the market was going down, the luxury market was going way down. Now I want to throw June in there because just as I'd never seen a 3-month decline such as that in my 30 years, I've never seen a 1-month rebound, anything like this in my entire life. And so what we're seeing in June is over 9,000 closings and a 1-month increase in average sales price of 11% on a price per square foot basis. And so, again, that's dramatic. And I didn't know what a V recovery was until a couple months ago. This is a V recovery, like probably to the T, the definition of a V recovery. And again, pulling some numbers for Seattle, I think you guys are going through about the same thing. I pulled up for June in Seattle metropolitan area. I think the average sales price increased 2.6%. For King County, I think that's a relevant county for you guys. Average sales price for June was up 5.85%. And I think for Pierce County, which I also think is kind of in your wheelhouse, average sales price went up 8.2%. So again, I think this V recovery, and I was just on a call with a title rep yesterday who said July is going to continue that trend upwards. So certainly we're in a V recovery mode. And in the calls that I was having in April and May, I was pretty gloom and doom, but what I had said is, we're going to recover. And once I think we can look in the future and say, hey, we've got an answer to the COVID problem, the pandemic we're in, we'll see that recovery. So I'm right in the sense that we've recovered, but I had no idea it would happen this fast. I had no idea that in spite of it, and look, if you guys watching the news, Arizona is a really bad, COVID environment right now. And yet we're still all of a sudden breaking records. And I think that the name of the game here is inventory. And it's really the driving force in seeing increases. I read that your year-over-year decline in inventory is like 40%. So your inventory for June of 2020 is 40% lower than it was in 2019. In Phoenix metropolitan area, we're down to about 8,000 listings when our normal carrying of inventory is closer to 15,000. And then a really interesting statistic to talk about a lack of supply. In the Phoenix metro area, we have almost 14,000 homes under contract with only 8,000 listings. So that is incredible turns. And again, I think for June, you guys had about 1.6 months of inventory, which is also what we would call a really healthy seller's market. And again, it's just lack of inventory is the driving force here. So now that we all know what we've been dealing with over the last 4 or now 5 months, you have to understand this from the appraiser's perspective. This is incredibly difficult to account for. When we're in a stable market, when average sales price for the year is relatively unchanged, appraising is pretty easy. But what we're doing as an appraiser is we're using historic data to say what a house is worth today. And so anytime we look back and look at that historic data, we need to account for market changes. And the way it's pretty much always been in my business is you look back over the last year and say, okay, I can look at this last 12 months and develop a trend analysis to say, okay, property values have gone up maybe 0.5% a month or 0.25% a month, or in some cases 1% a month when we're having a really good market. The best appraisers right now realize you can't do that because the market has been so up and down that if you were to try and apply a 0.5% a month appreciation rate, you would be misleading your end user, if that makes sense. So the best appraisers are looking at this chart or redeveloping a chart that's more specific to your immediate market and then applying time adjustments, but the time adjustments no longer should be consistent. You're not making 0.5% a month because again, you need to account for the way things were going before March and then what happened in April, May, and what's happening again in June and July. And I will tell you, as I became more aware over the last 30 days of which direction this market's headed, I have really, really focused on June and July closings. Okay, so the last appraisal that I finished before I came on this call, I had 8 comparables. 2 of them were pendings. Pendings are really helpful in a market where we're trending up because it kind of shows the underwriter things are continuing to get better. And then instead of making downward adjustments some months and upward adjustments some months, by focusing on the June and July stuff, I really put myself in a position where I didn't really have to make many adjustments at all. So I suggest that as you're preparing to meet with your appraiser, hopefully you're meeting with the appraisers, that you're aware of what's going on here. And as you're running comps, maybe to bring with you, really try and pay a particular emphasis on the June and July data if you can. And if you're armed with May and April data, to try and educate your appraiser to understand that the market's dramatically different since then. And as questions go, I think Sky or Jeff, do you have the ability to just monitor the chat to see if you get questions? If that's possible.
Jalen will monitor them and then bring them up. So if you want to stop after a slide and just see if there's any questions, that's fine. Okay. I have a question. I mean, you brought it up already, is you said specifically, hey, assuming that you're meeting the appraiser at the house. I think that's really a key point here because I don't think a lot of agents do. I know some do, but I'm talking to agents all the time and they're like, well, what do you think about this? We're way over value. And I'm like, dude, go meet the appraiser, bring comps with, show the, how many offers you have on the house and all these other things that the appraiser needs, like literally put a package together because we got to work on the appraiser to make sure it comes up to the value that we need. How important is that? Can you let these agents out here know what that looks like?
So Jeff, the last part of this presentation, I'm going to really focus on that interaction. It's incredibly important. Like I had an inspection yesterday and I'm still a field appraiser. I like to be out as much of the day as I can. And this house was $20,000 higher than anything else in the subdivision. It clearly was the product of of an increasing market. And the agent's like, yeah, it's vacant on lockbox. Just use your key. You're good. And I was just thinking to myself, like, here's this agent's probably going to make a nice 3% commission on this and isn't even going to take the time to send me comps, talking to me about upgrades, talking to me about the market conditions, anything like that. Lucky for them, I'm going to do my own due diligence. But I just look at those interactions or the lack of interactions, and I just think, okay, that realtor is not doing a great job for their clients. So yeah, that'll be a real focus. Again, it's a bit of a pivot because there's this narrative that, hey, leave the appraiser alone. The appraiser doesn't want to be bothered. The appraiser can't or won't take your information. That you're probably right. They probably don't want to be bothered, but sometimes they don't have the luxury to just put the mute button on you. And I would be there and I would make myself involved. And I think you're going to be happy with the results that leads to.
Hey, Jay, I think the
yeah.
only question we had was this chart right here. Is this based on a certain price point?
No, that is all sales. And I probably, if
Okay.
I had good Seattle data and I didn't have access to all this information, I probably would have segmented a luxury home market versus a lower end market because they don't entirely coincide. But no, that is all sales in Maricopa County area in our Phoenix market over the last 4 months. Really good question. Again, as we said, as of July 21st, so I just pulled that the other day, it's just crazy how fast we're burning through inventory. I have my broker's license. It's unbelievably rare that I do any deals. It's mostly for really good friends and when I'm flipping houses. And within the last 48 hours, the 3 listings, which is a lot of listings for me, I never have that. All 3 of those listings went into escrow because there's just an incredible lack of supply. So in terms of turn times, oh, good. I think we ran this. Yeah, we've got this for your county. So I just wanted to, COVID is a little bit impactful to us. What we had is, and this isn't a chart for that. This is a chart just for, the last few months. What we found is when COVID first became a really big concern, there were a bunch of appraisers in our market specifically that were saying, we're taking ourselves out of this for a while. We're not going to go on inspections. If you could get waivers on inspections, we'll do them. But otherwise, we're just going to take a break. So just as with property values, when you lose an inventory of appraisers, turn times tend to get a little worse and fees tend to get a little higher. In Arizona, July is always our hardest month because everybody leaves Arizona in July. I would assume you don't have that problem to as great a degree because why would you leave Seattle in July? It's beautiful. But I think we're running fairly consistent 8 to 8.5 day turn time. I know we are incentivizing appraisers a little bit more. You'll see our appraisal fees have gone up a little bit in at least 2 of the 3 markets. As we try and manage our turn times, sometimes we'll pay the appraisers a little bit more. But keep that in mind. If we're adding a day to turn times right now because rates are so low and the markets are so hot, just let's move things along maybe a day earlier in your process so we're not losing deals over it. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, just a question on fees. Like, I remember the good old days before 2008, the meltdown where appraisals were like $400, like 400 forever. And now, like in the last, it was almost an immediate change, right after 2008, and they came out with these new appraisal, separation anxiety rules or whatever the hell they are, like don't talk to the appraiser. And Apex came out of that, obviously, so we're happy for that, I guess, to an extent, so we get to see you guys. But at the same time, the costs have gone through the freaking roof. Now it's $800 to $900 in a lot of cases for an appraisal. Can you comment on that?
Yeah.
Are they doing more work, or do they deserve a raise a long time ago, or what?
Well, so there's a few factors there. One, appraisal fees were pegged at a certain number, and it's different for different markets. For Arizona, it was like $375. I think in your area it was lower 400s. It was pegged like that for a long time. So certainly there were appraisers that wanted a raise and certainly took advantage of the circumstances to get a raise. Also in 2008, what happened is you basically put a middleman in the process in most cases to manage the compliance, to make sure that appraisers are neutral and objective and are qualified. So yeah, you're right. Appraisals should have jumped about $100 right away. The other thing we have happening, Jeff, is being an appraiser kind of sucks. And it's pretty hard to become an appraiser. And the reality is there aren't many people entering the profession, and appraisers just are dying and retiring. And so that's part of the problem. The reality is if you're faced with 6 months before you can get a license and really 2 years before you can start getting work as a certified appraiser, you want to know that you're going to have a job for a long time. And the thing that's facing appraisers is technology. Like we talked before the call, if you're getting over 50% appraiser waivers, that's not good for the appraisal industry. You know, it's good for lenders because you're getting deals done faster, but for appraisers, that's 50% of the work we used to get is now going away. So we're losing appraisers. And again, it's that whole supply and demand thing. There is more demand for the appraisers that are still around. I will tell you, and I can't probably say too much about it, but Apex is affiliated with a company called Option, and I've seen the future. I've seen the technology they're working on, and it would not surprise me if towards the end of 2021, where you are seeing appraisers delivering appraisals start to finish in a day and for dramatically reduced fees. So it's the first thing I've been excited about in my industry in a very long time, because I think it's the perfect hybrid between technology and human interaction. And so there's good things coming, and it'll lead to lower turn times, and it'll lead to cheaper appraisals. So just bear with us, because I think we're going to be the first to offer it in our market, and I think we're going to be able to offer it to our good clients like you, Jeff, and your partners. Okay. So I do want to talk about how acting us for appraisal process. The way things used to be, we get an order for an appraisal, and 99% of the time it was a full appraisal with a full inspection. Fannie and Freddie came out with these COVID protocol that have been extended to August 31st, and it wouldn't surprise me if they get extended longer. And Jeff, don't hesitate to unmute yourself if you'd like to talk about this. So my understanding about what happens here is the order gets the appraisal gets ordered, and there might be a circumstance where the appraiser says, I don't feel comfortable going into this house. Maybe we've had a spike in COVID cases, or in some cases we'll call to get access for maybe a refinance or whatever, and somebody's coughing and sneezing and say they don't feel well. And those are cases where the appraiser might go back to Apex, to us, which in turn will go back to Jeff to say, hey, we're not super comfortable doing a full appraisal. Can you appeal for a drive-by or a desktop? Does that sound right to you, Jeff? You have the ability to go into the system and do that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the property, but yeah, I mean, on Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they do allow for drive-bys in certain scenarios. So yeah, it's case by case, but for the most part, we've been able to do most of those. I mean, we haven't really had a lot of problems with the interior inspections so far.
Good.
So we haven't had that happen a lot, but
Good.
There have been a few that we've done drive-bys on for sure.
Yeah. And so what I want to be clear to the agents on the call is that sometimes waiving the interior inspection could be the difference between the appraiser coming in at the contract price or not. If your listing is the ugliest house in the neighborhood with no upgrades, no features, that might be a circumstance where a waiver for a drive-by only actually works to your advantage. But be mindful of a couple things. In the majority of the cases, I find the appraiser's measurements are larger than what the county records say. So if the appraiser doesn't get access to the property, they're almost assuredly going to use the county record square footage. And that in some cases could mean your house is not getting enough credit square footage wise. So I would try not to let somebody just do a drive-by or a desktop. Also, if you have one of the nicer houses in the neighborhood, you have impressive features and upgrades, you really don't want to let that appraiser skip out on the inspection if you can help it. So that might be something when you're ordering the appraisal or when you're putting the loan in place or you're working with your buyers, you should tell the buyers to let Jeff or whoever your lender know, hey, I don't want the inspection waived here. Like if it ever comes up, like I want to make sure we're doing the full inspection. And just super quick story. I had a good friend of mine call, appraisal came in $25,000 below the contract price. And the appraiser got a waiver for the inspection, never called any agents, never confirmed anything, and screwed up the appraisal. Didn't give them credit for some upgrades they should have. Used the wrong square footage, used the county square footage instead of the MLS square footage, got the basement square footage wrong. And they ended up having to order a whole new appraisal. And then the new appraisal with a full inspection came in at the contract price. So just be aware of that stuff. And one thing you should know, just because the appraiser has gotten the inspection waived doesn't mean they're not obligated to get information about the property. Fannie Mae says you're still obligated to do everything you can to find out anything you can about the property. But some appraisers honestly are lazy and they take advantage of people not knowing that. And they're like, hey, I got a waiver. I'm still going to charge the same amount of money. I'm just going to get through a lot faster. So just be mindful of that. That's part of a process. And if you think you have one of the nicer houses, don't allow that appraisal to be done without an inspection. Okay, so that's just more on what we're already talking about. So here's the other thing. Again, I'm telling you that this is an incredibly difficult market. And I think most appraisers are low B and C students, and you need Dean's List appraisers right now. You need people that really, really know the market and really, really care about their job and treat it with the attention that it certainly needs in this case. The good news for all of you is that Apex, our company, realizes that the most important part of our job is if we find the right appraiser. And if we find the right appraiser ahead of time, everything else about our process becomes way easier. So we work hard to that end. But a term that's really important in my industry and for this call is something called geographical competence. Does the appraiser have the locational expertise to give an accurate appraisal of the property? I see a lot of the bad appraisals in my community. Realtors send me bad work all the time. And the number one reason I see an appraisal with a conclusion that I think is in error is because the appraiser didn't understand the market they were appraising in. I'm sure you guys have those too, where you have these specific neighborhoods that if you cross this busy street, the neighborhood's way different. Property values may go down significantly. You go across this area, maybe you're in a different school district and property values change. So it's really important that the appraiser is geographically competent. And to make sure that you might want to start interviewing your appraisers when they're calling on your listings to get access. Warning, this isn't for the faint of heart. Appraisers probably aren't going to like that too much. But I would ask that you just always keep your level of professionalism way up here. No matter where the appraiser goes, you just always be kind and professional. I think I would start the call like this. It's your listing. Take the key out of the lockbox so you know they have to call you. I would say, look, you and I have never worked together. All I'm trying to do is protect my client's best interests. I have a couple questions for you just to make sure that I'm comfortable that you have a good understanding of our market. It's entirely reasonable that you would want to do that you would want to make sure that appraiser is geographically competent. Anything that you can ask them that somebody who knows the neighborhood would be able to answer, maybe what school district it's in. My favorite question to ask an appraiser is, can you please give me an idea what geographical boundaries you're going to use to select your comps? Because if you ask them a question like, how many appraisals have you done in my zip code or in my subdivision? You just don't know if they're telling you the truth, but you really want to test to make sure they have an off the top of their head understanding about your market. And that's really important because you want to know where they're going for comps, because you want to make sure they're not going to this inferior neighborhood that's across the street or on the other side of this canal or across from this park. You want to make sure that they have a fundamental understanding and they're using sales from here. Okay. Another question that I would ask is, I would ask if they're certified. And there's a reason for that. The good news for all of you is Apex only use certified appraisers. There's a rare exception when we're in an incredibly remote market and the only geographically competent appraiser we can find is a licensed appraiser. We might make an exception. But otherwise, we want to work with the top of the industry, and we're looking for certified appraisers. Just so you understand the levels, there's a certified general and a certified residential. Those are what you should want. Those are the experienced appraisers. The level below that is licensed. You can now get an appraiser license in 6 months. And I'm just telling you, I was a terrible appraiser after 6 months. I was a terrible appraiser after a year and 2 years. I'm still learning today. I would never trust a transaction with a licensed newbie appraiser. Okay. Another thing you should be concerned with is you don't want a trainee doing the inspection. What happens is after you take your just under 200 hours, I think you can get a trainee license, and then you go and park that license under a certified appraiser. And the way it used to be is that certified appraiser would go with you on the inspections, go with the trainee on the inspections, and then you're fine. But what happens now is the trainee is allowed to go on that inspection without their mentor, and you run that's the eyes and ears for the mentor, and you run the risk of getting the appraiser missing things, okay, is the reality of it. So also there's something called bifurcated appraisals, and I don't want to bore you with too much on this, other than to say there is now a product out there where the person that's calling you to do the inspection might not be an appraiser at all. It could be a realtor. It could be just a random dude. It could be an Uber driver. And all they're doing is shooting pictures and sending them to the appraiser. Again, you run the risk of getting an appraisal that's not accurate because the appraiser was not doing the inspection themselves. Do we have any questions on any of that stuff, or should I move it along?
Yeah, so wondering, let's say they don't pass the test, right? Can you request a different appraiser in those scenarios? And then how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so what I think you do, the first thing, and I want to be super clear on this, politely get off the phone. Works so much better than it'll be a cold day in hell before you ever come into my house. Because sometimes if there's some appraisal management companies that aren't as appreciative of how important this is as we at Apex are. There's not a guarantee you're going to be able to get that appraiser off the job. So just say, hey, let me check my schedule and get back to you. And then what you really want to do is, in every scenario, there should either be an appraisal desk or an appraisal management company. Apex is an appraisal management company. You want to get to the decision makers as fast as you can. And so usually what you would do is you would call Jeff or call his loan team and say, I had a really bad phone call with this appraiser. I don't think they're geographically competent. That's really important. It can't be about value. If the conversation is, I just need him to promise me he's going to hit the contract price, I can't help you. I can't give you another appraiser over value-related issues. Over professionalism and competency, I can. So instead of having you have to explain it to Jeff, who has to go and explain to somebody else, you really want to get to the appraisal desk and say, I can't let this appraiser in. I'm really worried they're not going to give me a fair number because they didn't show geographical competency. I'm not going to let them in, so we need to get somebody else. And I think at Apex, we'll always give you someone else as long as it's for the right reasons. And I think the feedback I get is most of the time you'll get a new appraiser. And just the last thing I'll say on this is, when we get that situation, if a realtor calls me and tells me that, I'm incredibly apologetic. And then I go back to our appraiser assignment team and I say, I need the best you got. Like, I don't want to be in this position again. Make sure you're getting me somebody who really knows this neighborhood, because this agent's tough and we got to get it right. Any
That's
others?
super helpful. And I think that does answer the question. Someone had a scenario where the appraiser had just moved here from Florida. So that same did not have the geographical competency. It sounds like it came in 250 under.
And almost for sure they had COVID, right? If they're coming from Florida?
Yeah, so all
Okay.
that.
All that. Okay. So let's talk about something. Again, I am a big believer, and we're going to get into the package I think you should bring on the next slide. But I think relationships starting on the right foot are really helpful. They might be a little mad at you. The appraiser might be a little mad that you grilled them at the phone call. So we got to make it up to them and get back going on the right foot. I think right now appraisers are really appreciative if the agent's meeting them there and getting there a little bit early and kind of prepping the house for the inspection. I'm probably averaging myself about 4 inspections a day. And to me, to a certain extent, every inspection, I'm putting myself a little bit at risk. Okay. And I'm a little less comfortable. I wear a mask, and I'm not even that paranoid about this stuff. I wear rubber gloves sometimes. But I go home to 4 kids and a wife, and my wife is sitting further and further away from me on the couch right now because I'm putting myself at risk at these inspections. So I don't traditionally ask, but I really appreciate it when the agent gets there early and they're turning on lights so I don't have to touch light switches, and they're opening doors. And right now, I used to not care. Right now, I love it when the sellers are out of the house and they take their sneezy coffee kids with them. It just puts me a little bit at ease. I have a greater respect for the agent that I'm working with, and I appreciate that level of professionalism. So consider doing that, just like you would if you were preparing a house for a showing. I think appraisers really appreciate that kind of stuff right now. So now let's talk about the most important interaction you can have, and that's meeting the appraiser at the property and giving them useful information. I'm going to start with the purchase contract. I think in every package, there should be a purchase contract. The good news is 99 out of 100 times, the appraiser is going to get that from the lender and the appraisal management company. But oddly enough, one of the 2 appraisals I wrote up this morning, I got a copy of the purchase contract, but not a copy of any of the counter offers. And so what I saw was it was listed at $700,000. I have the offer at $640,000. If I hadn't been doing this a really long time and I didn't know what I was looking for, I might have thought the contract price was $640,000. What I did is I look at the end of the contract and I see the counteroffer box checked, which means I know that I wasn't given a counteroffer and that I asked for it. But what happens way too often in our industry, there's too many appraisers out there that are kind of focused on the contract price. And so there can be a scenario where, like in that example, where I only have the contract at $640,000. There's appraisers out there that might, I ended up appraising it at $680,000. The final counter was $670,000. But let's go back to $640,000. I think that's the offer. And when I'm running my comps, I might think, hey, this house is worth somewhere between $635,000 and $670,000. But since we're only under contract at $640,000, I'm just going to do the safe and easy and lazy thing and appraise it at $640,000. That happens. That happens sometimes. And so we've been in situations where we get the appraisal back. It's at $640,000. It shows the sales price is $640,000. And we're like, uh-oh, you didn't get the counter at $670,000. And so they'll change the contract section of the appraisal to $670,000. But maybe they don't want to change the appraisal now because they know the underwriter's seen it at $640,000 with their signature on it. And they know Caleb at Apex has seen it at $640,000. And they realize that maybe they're worried that there might be some implications of them changing that value. Implications like all of a sudden the underwriter doesn't trust their work anymore because they've signed their opinion of value at 640. Now what, they're just magically going to say, oh yeah, or 670,000. So I don't want any of you to lose a contract, lose a transaction because the appraiser didn't have all the right contract information up front. So bring a copy of the contract. On top, put the final counter offer and highlight the sales price. Okay, really important. Don't let yourself lose a deal over that. Okay, now more than ever, or almost ever that I've seen, we're seeing multiple offers submitted. We're seeing houses on the market, especially at the lower price points, for just a few days, 2, 3, 4, 5 offers submitted. As an appraiser, I like to see that. I like to know what it's under contract at, obviously, but I also like to know what the offers are because that helps me gauge what the demand for our house at a specific list price at a specific point in time is. So I don't need every page of the contract. In Arizona, I want page 1, 2, 3, and 10. 1 is the offering price. 2 lists what personal property is being requested on the offer price. And 3 is the concession figure. And then 10 is the signature page. So you don't have to give me the full 10, 11 pager. But it would be helpful if you say, hey, we had 3 offers on this property and here they are. Because what that might do is, I'm not going to tell you if you've had a bidding war and all of a sudden your $600,000 list price is under contract at $675,000. I'm not here to promise you that multiple offers is going to get me to that point. But what it probably will do is help get the appraiser to the very top of their comfort level. And what I'll do is I'll say in my report, because it'll be clear to the underwriter that, hey, he's pretty aggressive on this price. Why? And I'll say in my report that home was on the market 2 days. There were 11 showings and 4 offers. And I received copies of all 4 offers. And so I'm comfortable that there is very significant demand, probably associated with a current lack of supply. And that's going to help get me to maybe a higher number than I would. So not bad to staple the 3 offers or whatever you have. And then on top, do a little cover letter that says, we're on the market this many days. Here's how many offers we had. Here's how many. I've got 2 other people that say, if this falls out of escrow, call me and I'll get you another offer. That's helpful. And again, I will use that in my addendum and maybe it'll help me get to a certain conclusion. Okay. There's 2 documents that I think that you should prepare and bring with you to your appraisal. One is a features list. Tell me all the things about this house that make it nicer than most. I'm going to do the inspection, or especially in cases where the inspection is being waived, but normally I'm going to do the inspection and I'm going to see most of the upgrades and take my own notes, but I'm not going in your attic. And so maybe I'm going to miss the extra insulation, or maybe you have a high efficient air conditioning unit that maybe I wouldn't catch on my own. So it's just nice to have all that in one document. And what I'll usually do, because it helps me tell my story to an underwriter, I'll usually scan that document and include it right in the report. So you're going to help me provide useful information and tell the story that maybe says, hey, our house is nicer than most. So Sky, did we have questions, or I keep going? Okay, just unmute yourself. And when I see you unmute yourself, I'll know to stop. So the next document that I recommend you create, and fully understanding that to a certain extent you're at the mercy of your sellers on this one, is a chronological list of improvements that have been made to the house. Okay. The way I like to see it, in 2019, they did a new roof and new carpet in the bedrooms, and here's how much it cost. In 2017, they replaced their hot water heater and remodeled their kitchen, and here's what it cost. Again, it's about helping me tell my story to an underwriter and maybe this is a nice convincing argument that condition adjustments should be made and quality adjustments should be made. So again, that's another document I might put right in my appraisal. And so I think that that becomes useful information. I would pay particular attention to kitchen and bathroom remodeling, because you don't see this, but there's a place on my form when I hit a certain box, I get a pop-up screen. And that pop-up screen prompts me, has the kitchen been updated or remodeled? Has the bathroom been updated or remodeled? And if so, what time frame? Under a year, 1 to 5 years, 5 to 10 years, 10 to 15 years, or time frame unknown. So you can help me answer that question. And again, it's about giving the appraiser good information. What you got?
So logistically, would you email this during like this time, or would you hand it to him with gloves, like spray some hand
Yeah.
sanitizer on it, or you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you should be there. I think you should be there if you can. Again, if you're sick or the appraiser's coughing, I understand you might want to change your game plan. But I think that interaction where you're handing them all this information, and again, getting there early and turning on lights and opening doors, I think is the right approach if you are comfortable doing that. It's your one chance to be impactful. What happens too much in the real estate industry, and it's, hey, vacant, go use your lockbox, have a great time. But I'm going to scream at the top of the mountain if you come in below the contract price. And it's just not very effective, because once an appraiser signs their name to a value, there is a propensity to not want to change it. And we work hard at our company that if we think an appraisal's wrong, or we think an appraiser's digging their heels in when they shouldn't, we work hard to try and get that appraiser to see the light and change their value. But it's difficult. When you have the greatest impact is when you're meeting the appraiser, when you're talking to them, and you're giving them comps. So that's the next thing. Let's talk comps for a second. So now your package includes the contract, the multiple offers, the upgrade list, the features list. Let's talk comps for a minute. I think that you should bring with you somewhere between 3 and 10 comps. 3, that number I have a reason for, and that is that you'll never see an appraisal with less than 3 comps. And so if you're that appraiser, if you're that realtor who brings 1 comp with you, what I found that means is you can't find anything else that supports your contract price, and we're in big trouble. So that's like a red flag for me. And I say 10 because at some point it's just too much. And I don't know, it could be, you could bring 3, 5, 6, but I think somewhere once you hit 10, we're starting to get to where it's like, okay, information overload. The format that I prefer is give me the 1-page plano, give me the 1-pager that's got the information on the subject. You don't need to print picture pages. I'm going to go online and look at the pictures myself. You don't need to print the county records page. I'm going to go verify the closing information on it. I don't like the big spreadsheets with a ton of comps on there. I like the 1-page planos, and then write any notes that you have. Maybe you've been in some of these houses. As an appraiser, what I found over time is you guys only list the good stuff on the listing. And so I might not be privy to the green carpet or the kitchen smelling like tuna fish. But if you've been in that house, you might have more information than me. And so you can provide that for me at the inspection by just giving me notes. It's to say, I was in this house, here's what's wrong with it. That's really good information for me. Don't ignore pendings or actives. Most appraisals you see nowadays will have at least 1 active or pending on there. I would skip the overpriced listings. I can find overpriced listings without your help. It's the lower price listings that are concerning to me. If we're under contract at $625,000 and there's a model match next door that's offered for sale at $600,000, the principle of substitution says, why would somebody pay $625 when they can get it for $600? So I would focus on the lower price listings and tell me why yours is better. Okay. The other thing I'd say is, again, it's about being impactful at this inspection. Don't ignore the bad stuff. Okay. Like if the house if you're under contract at $700,000 and the house next door sold yesterday for $650,000, and it's really similar to ours, you have two choices in my mind. You can keep that out of your package and hope that I miss it. Long pause. I won't miss it. I'm going to find it. And so you have, you could hope, you can ignore it and let me do my own due diligence and find it and not have your insight. Or you can give me the list, the house, say, I know you're going to see this, but here's what's wrong with it. Okay. So I would really focus on giving everything, not just the good stuff. What do we have? You're off mute.
I think we're good. My
Okay.
wheels are kind of turning because I was just in the market very recently, and we saw what we thought was a lot of agents almost baiting by listing low, it seemed like, to get that competition, get the multiple offers coming in. But then you do have that, the flip side is like, the appraisal could come in low. So we actually did a 22 AD in order to win ours. So I guess, what are you seeing like on, as far as the list, like pricing the listings? Do you have any feedback for the agents on this call, just given like what's going on in the market right now?
Yeah, so for sure I'm seeing that strategy, which is, in fact, there's a big realtor here in town, like that's his entire strategy is he prices it low and he sets it open. He's like, we're going to consider offers between Friday and Sunday, and tries to schedule showings when multiple people are going to be there to kind of give everyone that fear of, I got to get this house. I certainly see that. Again, whenever you get that house in escrow, I think you just need to explain that to the appraiser, because again, if the appraiser sees you listing it at 600,000, the way it's historically been is that realtor thinks it's probably worth somewhere around 600,000. So that's kind of setting the expectation a little bit lower. So if that's your strategy, make sure that some way or another you're kind of verbalizing it to the appraiser. And I do think, as probably you saw as you were a buyer in this market, there is a bit of dishonesty in the industry in that way, like trying to scare people into making offers and telling them, hey, there's 2 offers coming, when that's not always true. And it's our job as appraisers to make sure you're not paying too much. Okay. Like, especially when there's a bidding war. So I had an agent. So I told you, like, I have 3 listings. One of them's my house and 2 of them are good friends, and they're all going in escrow. And one of them, like, had been on the market for like a couple weeks. And this lady who they just had lost out on like 4 other properties sent me an offer over a list price. And in my head, I'm like, why would you do that? It's been on the market 2 weeks. Like, you're not doing a great job for your clients. I don't know. You just got to gauge the market. And if you're in a bidding war, like, just always be mindful of what the comps say, because sometimes the biggest winner on the bidding war is the biggest loser, right? Because they got the house, but they're paying $20,000 more than market. And hopefully as an appraiser, we're going to try and keep you in good shape on that, but you never know. Every so often you have appraisers that just are so focused on a contract price, they're not paying attention to what the comps say, and maybe the comps just don't support it. In terms of the way I run comps, because I think it's the way you should run comps when you're meeting the appraiser, is I'm a huge location first guy. My first search every time, if I'm in a subdivision, is actives, pendings, and closed sales within the last year in my subdivision. I don't want to use sales that are 11 months old. But I'll tell you this, if the only sale I have in my subdivision is 9, 10, 11 months old, I might still use it, because if location's the most important thing to me, I can adjust for time, but it's really hard for me to adjust location if I don't have a frame of reference in my neighborhood first. The reason I want you to start doing that is there's realtors out there that say, hey, I'm in escrow at $700,000. I'm going to look for comps that have sold for $700,000 and higher. And when that happens, you're missing sometimes really important data that the appraiser is going to find, and you've lost your window of opportunity to tell the appraiser what you know about that house. So get yourself grounded, get the subdivision data first. I want to know if it's a master plan community with 1,000 homes, I'll narrow it down to my phase or maybe my builder. If I'm in a really remote area, obviously I can't really do that. And so I'll put some other parameter in there. But generally speaking, give me my subdivision, all the data first. The next search that I do is I look at my MLS map and I draw boundaries on that map, which is why that interview question from earlier is so important. And then I'll put a square footage parameter. Maybe I'll start at plus or minus 15%. I'll put a lot size parameter. I'll put a year built parameter. And so then my next search, so now I've got everything that's great in my location. And then I have that hybrid between my location, my general location, but now some similarities with respect to the house. That's my second core search. Any other searches I do after those two are really specific to my house. What's unique about my house? What makes my house special? And then I'll go and try and target houses that meet those characteristics. If I back a lake or a river or a park or a creek or a golf course, I'll do specific searches to try and find other houses that have that aspect. If I back a busy street, that's important too, because I need to see how the market reacts to that external obsolescence. So I'll go and look for other houses that are on busy streets. If you have a basement in a non-basement neighborhood, I don't remember if Seattle is a big basement area. I'm guessing not, but I'm not sure. Then I'm going to do a search for basement homes. If I'm brand newly remodeled, I'm going to do a search for other newly remodeled homes. This is where if I'm a 2-story in a 1-story neighborhood, where I'm going to start focusing on just looking for 2-story homes. So after I've done that, I have my search that emphasize location. I now have my searches that emphasize really specific aspects about my property. And then the one in the middle that kind of blends the aspects of the neighborhood and my property. The other thing, again, is I'd focus, if you can, on June and July closings, because sometimes those will be dramatically higher in your market, 6 to 8% higher than a sale from April or May. And if you use those older sales, you might want to provide some charts either that you create or that you find online that kind of help the appraiser understands what's happened in our market over a certain period of time. So I think that covers my presentation. Hopefully there's some good information, and I'm happy to answer any questions or turn it back over to Caleb and Jeff.
Nice. So we had one that came in. What do you think about view?
So I'm a huge believer in view. I think view can be a primary emphasis factor. I do think there's trade-offs sometimes. Like we have houses on the side of the hill where you have dramatic views, but you lose usable yard area. So I think it's complex because I think it's, I have to factor in the view amenity, which is important, but I also have to factor in that in those cases, there's a diminished rear yard. I think that two appraisers, sometimes they look at golf course views and lake and creek views as all being the same. I am not one of those guys. Like, I would be interested in a house on a golf course, but I would not be interested in a house on a golf course that's about 200 yards from a tee on a dog leg where I'm going to get golf balls in my yard every day. I just don't want that house. And so my job as an appraiser to understand that, maybe make it your job as a realtor to help explain that. Backing a fairway is probably more desirable than backing a cart path in a tee box. I don't think all appraisers see it that way, but I think they should. But yeah, so view is one of the things that I emphasize on my secondary searches to try and find something that has a view. Like one of the two appraisals I finished today, again, I've done two. I had a $400,000 view adjustment to one of my comps. That's how important I think view can be. Yeah.
So, and feel free, guys, if anybody wants to just unmute themselves for this Q&A, if you have a specific scenario or issue recently that you kind of just want to get his expertise on, now would be the time for that.
You guys are great. This is easy. All right. Jeff, do you want to say anything, or any of you guys want to say anything on the way out?
So it's someone saying, what do you think when your client is using online home valuators, Bedford or Zillow as a benchmark for listing their home?
Yeah. So I think Zillow's terrible. And I think Zillow is dishonest. I've literally seen scenarios where Zillow says a house is worth $400,000, and then it gets listed 2 days later for $480,000. And guess what happens next? Zillow bumps up their price to like $470,000. That's dishonest. Like, I really think that. I think Zillow started with an amazing concept, and their concept was, we want to create a site that makes people happy and brings them joy. So we're going to inflate all the home values on our system, and people will continue to go visit because it makes them happy. What I have noticed is I think that values on Zillow have come down a bit since one really important thing has happened. Does anyone know what that is? Since Zillow started buying houses. I think that Zillow has changed their analytics, and I think values on Zillow are a little bit closer to reality. And I think that has at least something to do with the fact that now Zillow is a major buyer of houses. So that's kind of interesting, I think. Good question. Don't use Zillow. It is.
But they want the warm fuzzy until they have to make money, and then they change their whole guidelines to now we're lowball values because we have to buy houses.
I'm almost sure that that's happening. Like, again, I've seen it where the listing thing, that's not fair. That's not right. Like, a house, just because it's listed one day $100,000 overpriced doesn't mean that that's the new price on that. So that's Zillow's made my life miserable for a long time because I am forced to deal with the expectations of the homeowner that looks at Zillow. But thank goodness it's not good enough to take my job away from me.
Yeah, no kidding. Hey, cool. Jake, I got one last question for you. I just had this appraisal come in. It was a purchase down in Oregon, and the appraisal came in $300 under the list price. So do we tend to shoot people like that and never use them again? Or I mean, to me, from an appraisal standpoint, I mean, that just seems like a drop in the bucket. Like, how can you come in $300 short?
Yeah, we say that those appraisers aren't user friendly. I think I've known for a long time my job is not science and it's not scientific, and we're dealing with imperfect market conditions. Somebody on this call might care a lot more about view than another person on this call. And as an appraiser, it's really hard to reconcile things precisely because we're dealing with individual emotions and preferences and seller circumstances. So yeah, I don't like scenarios like that. I think that often those lead to internal conversations about, is that the type of person we want representing our company? So I'm sorry it happened to you. It doesn't mean he's wrong. And in some cases, what he's really telling you is it's actually, I think, probably worth about $5,000 less, but this is the 100% maximum I can do and still sign my name to it. But $300 is pretty annoying for sure. Sorry that happened.
Hey, Jay.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, we still hear that agents aren't supposed to talk to appraisers either. That's still true. Understood. It's not true, but there's a constant, I mean, it's not as bad as it used to be, but you still hear that periodically from appraisers.
So what I would say to you, and I'm glad you brought this up, you don't want to make your appraiser feel pressured.
Right.
You really don't. And that's important because we've had appraisers walk off of jobs at the last minute, still demanding to be paid, by the way, saying people are pressuring me and I don't feel like I can give a fair conclusion. I think a really good idea for all of the people on this call is, I understand when you talk to an appraiser, in your head, it's all about value. But take that out of the conversation with the appraiser. Talk about features, talk about comps, but don't ever talk about value. And when you hand a comp to an appraiser, don't say, hey, I think this is going to support our contract price, or if I can just get you to give $20,000 for this pool or this view, we'll be fine. Give good information, but let's just try not to ever talk about value, and you should be fine. And that's one of the things you might want to also ask the appraiser when they're calling you for access to the house is, hey, I want to meet you there. I'm going to turn on the lights. I'm going to have everything ready for you. I'm going to give you a package, but I'd like to spend a few minutes going over some of the comps I found and what I'm seeing in the market. I hope that's okay. So that way you're it's almost like you're reserving your spot at the table to have that conversation. If you're in a scenario where somebody from our company ever tells you, no, you're not allowed to do that, I can't meet you there, I'm not going to take that information, I personally would like to know that, or you can let Caleb know through Jeff. To us, that's not user-friendly, it's not professional, and it's depriving you of your opportunity to do the best job for your client. So I'm a strong believer that there's no place for that in our industry.
Perfect. Well, out of respect for everybody's time, Jay, that was amazing.
Thank
you. That was
you.
really, really good. Thank you for sharing your wealth of knowledge on this topic. Looks like we got some good questions answered, and I learned a lot today. So thanks again for both of you, Caleb, for bringing Jay on, and Caleb too, just because of the partnership that we've created together here at our new company here at NFM Lending. It's been a great relationship, and we're looking forward to continuing. Thank you all for being on the call as well. If you do have any follow-up questions afterwards, feel free to email me directly. And if I don't know the answer, I can certainly reach out to Caleb and Jay and get the answer for you. Other than that, have a great rest of the week, you guys. Enjoy this beautiful weather, and happy Tuesday.
Yes.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. Have a good day.